type of logo we're going to make is lines logo. So we're going to stay on the mountain motif for Isaac's Grocery Store. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the image of the mountains that we already have. We're going to go on to our next artboard. And now we're going to think about lines. Well, there are different ways you can make lines. You can make lines vertical, you can make lines horizontal. So let's first think about vertical lines. So I'm thinking about having the lines stop along the ridge of this mountain range. So you can kind of see the mountain range formed by the lines. So first thing is we're going to need lines. So I'm going to draw one line vertical right here. I'm going to color it, give it a black stroke, and make it thick enough to see. Now I'm going to isolate this. I'm going to double click on this line. So now it's isolated. So the only thing I can mess with is this line, and it's kind of makes everything else grayed out. So look at this line. I wish the top of the line, I can zoom in so you can see easier, is flat. I think it would look better if the top of this line was curved. So on this stroke, I'm going to open up the stroke panel options from my control bar at the top, and I'm going to make the cap curved. It's just going to give a slight rounded edge to my line. Great. So I'm going to zoom back out. Now I want lines to fill up all the way across. I'll make this line longer. I'm just dragging it longer. I'm holding shift so as I drag it longer, I don't accidentally drag it over to the side. I drag it straight up and down. The smart guides also help me drag it straight up and down, but holding shift also will make it so that I can only drag it one direction. So there are a couple ways of making multiple lines. One way is I can hold Option on my keyboard and shift, so I drag it directly sideways, and just drag another line across. And when I get it spaced the way I like, I release my mouse, and then I release the Alt and Shift keys. And if I like the distance between those, I could just hold down Command on my keyboard and hit D, the letter D, and repeat the same thing all the way across until I've created enough lines to cover my mountain. That's one way of creating my mountains. Another option I have is I could start off the same way, hold down Alternate and Shift, and drag a second copy, but this time I'm going to drag a second copy to the other side. And now I'm going to use the Blend tool. The Blend tool will make copies of something to fill in the gaps. You can see that now there are lots and lots of lines, so many, so close, that it looks like one continuous shape. That's too many, so I'm going to double click on the Blend tool, pull up the options, and instead of them being 4 pixels apart, I'm going to increase the distance between them. Here we go. Make them 20 pixels apart. Now this is still a preview, so I could make those adjustments to it by double clicking on this Blend tool. If I like the way this is and I want to make it permanent, I go to Object and Expand and hit OK. Now all of those lines it's expanded, and all those are individual lines. So I think that's pretty good. So next thing is we're going to make these lines cut off at the shape of this mountain range. So I'm going to take this mountain range, and I could go back with my pen tool and trace over it, but I'm going to see how well I could do with just an image trace. That does not look like what I wanted it to do, so I'm going to go to the image trace panel before I give up on it and see if I can. That actually looks very good. And I'm just adjusting this image trace. It's important to remember this image trace panel, especially if you're going to be recreating something that's already exists, not creating something that's original. A lot of time using image trace can save you lots of time. So I like the way this looks. I really like the way that it has this line. I get to adjust and see either less of the mountain range or more of the mountain range. And when I get it to a spot that I really like, this is only a preview, so when I get a spot that I really like, I can go to Object and click Expand, hit OK. So now you can see all these are actual shapes. I'm going to get rid of some of these shapes. I don't really need this shape on the top, so I'm going to click in the center of it and hit delete. You might notice I was clicking in the center. You do not want to click on the edge of the shape. That will just delete parts of the path between this anchor point and this anchor point. It just deletes that. To delete the entire portion of this shape, you want to click in the center and hit delete. I want to make sure I'm also using my direct selection tool. If I use my selection tool, then when I selected one piece, you see they're all grouped together. It will select the entire thing. The direct selection tool will allow me just to select part of it and delete it. That's what I'm trying to do. So I think that's pretty good. I think my lines are kind of sticking out the bottom. I think that's okay though. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to make sure that this mountain range is on top actually. I'm going to go to my range and bring to the front. I'm going to select everything at once. I'm going to go to my Pathfinder. Close up some of these windows. So now, using my Pathfinder, the Pathfinder allows you to cut out shapes from one another. You can kind of see how it makes the interaction between the two shapes. If I clicked minus front, that's not what I'm looking to do. If I'm going to click minus back, that's not what I'm going to do. What I'm actually looking to do is crop. It's not come out the way I was expecting it to do. Make sure that I've got all my shapes arranged, bring to front. Just realized the reason why this is not coming out well is because all of these shapes are, the pieces of this mountain are still being considered separate pieces. Even though they're grouped together, they're not object. Even though they're grouped together, they're not considered the same path. I can ungroup these. Right, now they're ungrouped, and you see if I grab them, they're different pieces. So I want these all to be considered the same path. So I need to select them all and make object compound path. Make. So now see that they're all considered to be one piece, indistinguishable from one another. Let's go back and see if we can, how that works now. Put this cover my mountain range. Select everything at one time. I'm going to make these two different colors so it's easier to distinguish between the two. Okay. Yeah, now it's easier to tell what's what. So now I'm going to choose crop. Did not work. Let's see, let's choose trim. Didn't work. This is not going the way I expected it to go. It may be because these are lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these lines into shapes. So I'm going to go to Object and expand the lines. It's going to turn every stroke into a shape. So now I'm going to try that one more time. And go to Crop. That's what I was looking for. Unfortunately, even though it did everything else right, because it was a shape, it cut away the rounded tops. So first I'm going to get rid of the line for the original line for the mountain. Select the same. So I'm going to use the magic wand and click on this to get rid of all the transparent parts. And then I'm going to select everything here and go to my zoom in. And with my direct selection tool, around these edges. Now this will take some time, so I'm going to fast forward while I do the rest of this. So now you see that we've finished our lines, creating our lines. Now we could have used the same technique to do horizontal lines. I'm not going to go through the tutorial showing you that. You'll just have to imagine that instead of drawing vertical lines, I drew horizontal lines and could have filled up the shapes the same way. But this logo isn't complete. Just like the logo on this side, we need the name Isaac's and we need the word description of what Isaac's is, which is a grocery store. I'm going to copy some of the things that I did on the first logo just to use on this second logo. Particularly the word Isaac's. As you recall, I spent a lot of time adjusting it, the spacing of things, making it correct. Having looked at it a little bit more, I want to make a little bit of further adjustments. I want to reduce the amount of space between these here, and I also want to reduce the amount of space between the I and the S. So I'm going back to my character panel and lowering the kerning right there. Make them both the space between the I and the S and the two C's similar to this visual space that I see between this S and A. Yeah, now that I've finished that, let's see. For this one, I think I'm going to increase the word Isaac's to be a little bit bigger because my icon is quite a bit bigger. So it's going to be a vertical logo instead of being a horizontal logo. What I don't like about this is that there's these weird empty spaces right here now. And I'm going to think about try to consider ways of getting rid of those. One way is just to delete the things that are sticking up high. So now that I think everything's mainly done with my logo, I'm going to go to Type and Create Outlines. Make sure my text is selected first. So with the text selected, now I'm going to go to Type and Create Outlines. And that will turn all of these into shapes. So now I can delete the pieces that I do not want. Let's try that again. These are grouped together. Well, these are a compound path. Remember us creating compound path? So these letters are compound paths. So I'm going to release it. So now I can delete one individual part of it. For this apostrophe, I can do a couple things. I could grab it and move it down and then make it smaller. And I think that's an alright solution. So now I'm going to just, I don't like now this S, I believe now needs to move just a little bit closer. Now the S and the apostrophe needs to move a little bit closer. Oops. Didn't get all of the apostrophe. So I'm going to grab that apostrophe and use my selection tool and grab the S. These are all grouped together, so I'm going to ungroup them. Grab the S and the apostrophe. Put those a little bit closer together. And now I'm going to, now I don't like the top of this I. I wish the top of the I looks more similar to the ends of the S's. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to grab this corner, and I'm just going to bend it a little bit. There we go. So now I'm going to grab, now I'm going to use my selection tool, select the word Isaac's, group it back together, move it up, closer. So Isaac's got bigger. I could make grocery store bigger, but I could also just, with these words selected, just use my tracking and spread the word grocery store out even further. Last time, to distinguish between these words, I made grocery store grocery bold and store light. So I like that because I think the word grocery is more important. But actually I just left it regular. I'm going to actually make it semi-bold italic. Actually, bold italic. Make it bold italic. Isaac's grocery store. Alright. That looks pretty good. So again, I'm going to highlight this. Make sure that it lines up on this side of my logo. Lines up on the other side of my icon. I say logo. The icon. The word marks. And now I can do the same thing to this word mark. I'm going to type, create outlines, so that I'm using my smart guys to make sure it lines up on both sides. Alright. Add up. This space is a little bit too much. Move this down. So it's hovering centered in between those two. Here's my line logo.